Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I am Inder Pal Kohli. I am Chief Technology Officer for HealthX, a large public health exchange in New York. And I have well over 2 decades in provider side of healthcare technology.
Awesome.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name's Amu. I am currently serving as the interim Chief Data and AI Officer for New York City Health and Hospitals. And prior to that, I have a lot of product experience across health tech, working through AI and even worked at Epic. So I can't answer any questions about Epic, but I've been across the entire health tech kind of spectrum at this point.
Thanks. Mike Boughton. I'm an emergency medicine doc at Harlem Hospital, and I'm the Chief Health Information Officer for New York City Health and Hospitals.
You had a comment or question that
Now it's
Just say it.
it's just inflammatory. No, my question. So this was about not being able to bill specifically for AI without a human in the loop. And my understanding is that for diabetic retinopathy, there is an FDA-approved algorithm, 2 different vendors that allow you to drop the hospital bill for that service. And there's a separate billing arrangement for the professional side. And 60% of the time, 50 to 60% of the time, when it says it's negative, no human needs to look at it. It's negative. So that was a very particular point that I decided that I was not going to pursue further.
No, it's a very good thing to bring up, especially for this panel, because we're trying to say taking data and making decisions and driving action in general. And if we keep fearing this idea that, well, we can't develop this because we can't get paid for it, today that might be true. And that's what I wanted to hear from you, because I've spent time in multiple administrations. And as I was saying, during the talk, is that there's a lot that happens at the top, and really nothing inside major things in the government happens without the White House's impact or approval or pushing, et cetera. Everybody sees it firsthand. A big difference now is that everything is a little bit more public. So you can see when somebody's disagreeing. Like, there are disagreements all the time between agencies and groups and the White House, et cetera, but those used to happen behind the scenes. They just happen now in front of the scenes, and so everything seems a little bit more crazy. And don't get me wrong, things are very, very different in some respects. But in this particular rulemaking part of it, there's not much that they can do without breaking the law. So that's a different case. But it's good that you brought that up. So let's. I wanted to talk about this first part, which is continuing on what you guys heard yesterday from, let's say just from a CTO perspective. Based on what you've seen yesterday, what can you guys already say you're feeling comfortable about taking, with or without AI, with a little bit of deterministic, but more about probabilistic? What are you willing to let the data take you forward and do today that you maybe would not have done last year or the year before?
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. Just a little bit of a context, right? I represent here neither a healthcare provider nor a product seller, but more as a neutral backbone, right? Nothing wrong with those entities. I was in healthcare provider space for 20 years, worked with my product vendors, but a neutral backbone of a data where, a hospital or a health system may more rely on an episodic data. We tend to see patient over a lifespan, longitudinal view, right? So we have what I say is a level of trust we have invested in our data, right? That leads to these better outcomes. Algorithms are not on its own delivering, and algorithms are pretty strong, and they work in other industries very well. Where it kind of sometimes breaks down is when we have a lack of trust in the data. And that is where I think what I say 2 years ago, yes, I was also chasing a shiny algorithm supposed to deliver. And then we realize it comes back to the data governance, data trust, and really the hard work. What I say is, interoperability is great because there are all these standards, but it requires consistency, a diligence on a daily level, the data stewardship. And I think that is what we have put in now, that we feel a little more confident that our data could be trusted to deliver the outcomes.
Nice. Same question for you guys as well, is what would you do today that you couldn't do last year?
Well, I think for H&H specifically, we had spent the last few years really working on standardizing, getting clean data, building that data trust, And I wouldn't say we're 100% there. It's a very complicated journey. As you can imagine, healthcare data has so many different components. It's a large multimodal data set. We have, especially with an organization like H&H, where we have numerous hospitals, numerous clinics, where we have to really build that trust across a very large body of users. But we're getting there. And I think investing in that foundational data and investing in that foundational data governance has helped us get closer to being able to build our own models, being able to think about how can we leverage existing like foundational models to solve some of the problems that we wouldn't have been able to do before, right? With we hadn't invested in data, we can't really do anything from an AI perspective. It is so foundational to garbage in, garbage out, right? Like if you have bad data, you're not really going to get a very high performing model. So we are very early on the AI journey, we'll say, but I think we are set up correctly to move forward quickly.
This is a meta question, but what would you say is the use of AI to help clean and improve your data for AI?
Honestly, that's a great question. When I was working in my past life, I worked for a company where we were building real world data, and it included bringing so much data from so many other health systems. And I had a whole team that was like normalizing data, standardizing data, cleaning it up, building an ontology. And now that's so much faster, right? Now there are tools embedded within Snowflake that can literally figure out where the data looks bad. They can things that used to take us a team, one person can do with the assistive AI. So yeah, I think technology is moving in so quickly, and AI moving so quickly that we are better able to handle big data sets and get to insights faster. Of course, if the data is bad to begin with, there's still work to be done to get to those insights. But we are better poised now to be able to bring in multiple data sets from different organizations, different types of data, and clean it up and get into a position where we can start doing AI or anything else.
So it is surprising how, and I'm glad that your answer was what it was, because it is surprising how little AI data science teams are actually using to do their data science itself. And so, for example, missingness of data, imputation of data, there's all kinds of everyday kinds of research problems that we have with data that it doesn't seem like we are taking our own advice about AI and implementing it to improve ourselves here. So maybe you can start off with that. What tools do you like and are you using, and where do you go?
A few years ago, I think drafting and summarizing notes was controversial. I don't think that's controversial anymore. I think where we're starting to use it, that it's, whether you call it AI or predictive model, we can have a machine learning conversation at a different point about definitions, but we need to turn down the noise around alerts.
When you say turn down noise, what do you mean?
Yeah, so you're in the hospital, we have a deterioration index on, and it will fire and it will show that this patient might deteriorate, and that's based on their vital signs, their white counts, all this information coming into the system. We've been tweaking the model, and what we found, to get actually people to respond to it, you need to show it way less often. You need to have much more specificity and way less sensitivity. So what we're essentially asking the model to do is to ignore. It knows there's a chance, there's a problem, and we're asking it to ignore it. And that's a really tough thing to turn around and tell a hospital administrator or to tell a doc, we're going to have this thing be quiet. But I'll tell you, so I was thinking of an emergency medicine doc. I worked in the emergency department on Monday. I have a patient with COPD that was admitted with the flu to the hospital. He was on BiPAP. His alarm was going off for maybe 3 minutes before the nurse was like, "Are you going to take a look at that?" I hadn't even heard it. I was sitting there, literally this blaring alarm had been going on for 3 minutes, and I had just been programmed myself to ignore it. So at some point, we have to take seriously the idea that we could use artificial intelligence to help sort through the noise, because just telling the doc, telling the nurse there might be a problem, it's not getting us to where we need to be.
Walk through that discussion with the administrators and others. When you say that, how is it a we've always done it before problem? Is it a compliance problem? Who's in the way?
I gotta say, we're very lucky in our system, because we have our CEO as a doc that sees patients, our basically acting chief medical officer as a doc that sees patients. People get this as a real problem. The question is, where do you actually set that threshold?
Mm-hmm.
Like, And that's both a technical conversation and a clinical conversation. And just finding that cut point is hard. So we've been creeping it up. We've been turning down the sensitivity and turning up the specificity. And there's not a right or a wrong answer to this. And I wish there was. I don't know how to optimize it yet.
So, Interpol, talk a little bit about the nature of so what we're all struggling with is these are all probabilistic systems, and in probabilistic systems they are all probabilities, and so there is no determinism. It doesn't matter how much we want it to occur. What could you do at a senior executive level to really explain this idea? Because I think if we polled the audience right now and said how many actually understand the difference between probabilistic versus deterministic, most of them raise their hand because they understand the words. But what does it mean because like what he's doing is he's basically adding more probability in certain areas and trying to put more determinism in other areas in order to do his damn job. So it's not like he's playing, having a game here. But what would you say? How would you teach this problem of determinism versus probabilism?
So if I wear my hat of a health system provider side of things, I think, yeah, I could be guilty of those over alerts, and that is one of the lessons we have learned. Right, you've been ignoring a deafening alarm for 3 minutes because we just blocked it out, and that's like on the front end. This is more of a workflow. It needs to be part of their workflow, the tool they're using, and it's just a simple black box score is not going to help it. It needs to provide an action, right? So that's from their perspective. Now, from the back end perspective, if we're writing these algorithms, I think that's the shift we have to make from to be more deterministic on this, right? And it is, yes, this is a high, whether it's a deterioration index or other risk scores, and an action item which could be trusted, right? And the trust is which is hard to earn. Action item, and we probably will get there in next few years, 4 or 5 years, where we have a point of care decision making which is applicable. But that is where I think we need to get to that first part is relatively easier to do, align it with their workflow. So a clinical manager, care manager is just getting a prioritized list of risks, and at ED, if they're taking an intake, they get the relevant history before and after. So that's easier to fix. It's getting that level of trust that an algorithm is either A, indicating an alert, B, providing an action item. Am I ready to take, and am I ready to trust that action, and should we take that action? I think that's the hard work which has to happen at not just at a data stewardship level, but at really a data algorithm and risk score development level, where again, maybe it's a plug for what I do, but it's a whole life journey of a patient across multiple institutions, which will only add more data points than if it's developed within a single hospital system.
Yeah, and I think that even though it is a plug, it's an important one, because if we assume that a probabilistic system is going to do some actions and these alerts, et cetera, probabilistic systems get better with more data. So if you could feed it more data from multiple places, that means that if there was a button on the system where most docs did not press the button within 3 minutes to turn it off, well, then a learning system reads that and says, it wasn't a very important alarm, now was it, right? And so that's the piece that we're not doing. And this is what I mean is, I'm complaining about myself, where we ourselves as builders are not using our own damn AI, but we're going to others and saying, why aren't you using AI? We're like, why the hell aren't you using AI to tell you whether or not to build the right line of code or build the right alerts? Like, I've been building medical devices for many, many years. And so like an infusion pump or a respiratory system, we set the alarm off because we say, okay, we're going to make it configurable, but I don't know when it should or should not go off. So I'll just leave the decision up to the doctor, right? And that's it. That's all.
It's the insistence on all points about having a physician or a nurse in the loop.
Yeah.
But I feel like that every time I talk about AI governance, every time I hear other organizations say this, they're like, don't worry, the physician's in the loop. And you're like, whoa, I don't want to be in the loop every time. Like, take something off my plate so I don't have to look at everything. You can't just keep feeding me more and more alerts. It's a tough situation. And then who's liable for it?
It is. And it's funny. So how many of you watch the streaming show PIT? PITT? Some of you, right? So if have you seen it, right? So so if you're, one of the problems with engineers and builders is they don't actually know the life of a physician and what they go through and all the bullshit that happens. And so that show apparently, is almost like a real-time show where things are happening, obviously super dramatic, every hour, and showing you what kind of realistic things happen and how information flies back and forth. What do you think, if you've seen it on the panel, what could engineers and people building things learn from that show that they wouldn't if they didn't watch it?
I'll take your question slightly differently because I don't watch it.
Okay.
I don't watch medical.
What's your life?
I
right?
don't watch medical TV generally. That's not what I do for fun. But what I'd say is it's like the whole, I forget what the most common methodology now. When I was like coming up through training, it was like lean methodology, and then there was others. It's like the concept of like the Gemba walk, but all that is like going to actually live in the environment that you're working for.
Right.
And I think one of the most compelling, I'm wholeheartedly stealing this from a journalist who I forget who said this, but he said the reason he thinks computer science has been one of the best areas of artificial development or artificial intelligence is that it's people that know coding, that's what they do for a living, and they know artificial intelligence. And so it's those two things together in a single mind. That's why that coding in AI has come across so well, meaning using AI to code. But in areas where the engineers don't know the workflow, it's lost.
That's right.
And I feel like I think it's one of the better arguments I've seen.
No, that's exactly right. So chime in here where figuring out what are the tools, what are the techniques, what are the technologies where we on the data side make the data better to help then define alerts and other areas using AI. Why are we struggling with AI in an area where it shouldn't be that much of a struggle?
I think that's a very interesting question. But I will say, just to chime in on Pitt, and I don't watch it. I watched half an episode and I was overwhelmed. So I can imagine not watching it if you're actually in the environment. But, I think what's important to highlight there is that as you're building technology, any technology, AI or otherwise, it's important to be embedded into the actual workflows, to actually understand what the problems are that we're trying to solve with AI. I think there's a certain kind of buzzwordness to AI where now every tool, every technology needs to have some AI component, but that's not always going to be successful unless we know what is the problem we're trying to solve. And that's not going to really we're not going to be successful at finding that problem unless we embed ourselves into the actual workflow, into seeing how a physician is living their day-to-day life, how a nurse is doing documentation. And I think that's between, the problem, the data, the AI, that's the story that we need to kind of fill out, right? And there is, I think, a healthy tension between wanting to move really fast, which I know Mike wants to move really fast and bring everything in, take the human out of the loop, but also doing it in a way where kind of lowering risk, making sure the data is clean so that the AI that we embed into a workflow is not giving you bad results. We're not, from a governance perspective, we're not introducing anomalies into a clinical workflow without a clinician or someone being aware of what's the probabilistic component that is being plugged into a workflow. I think it is very important that we understand at a very basic level what is a day-to-day life of a user and how can AI enhance it or augment it, but not necessarily replace it. And to ask if AI is the right solution for that problem.
No, that makes sense. And so I'm going to open up for questions now, but if you have one, please jump in and then I'll ask others. Go ahead.
Thanks for your talk. You all mentioned about predictive algorithms and making them smarter. One of the things that I've realized, and you also mentioned drug interact. Oh, I'm sorry. You mentioned another problem with over alerting, and it made me think about drug interactions and how they kind of solved that problem where it was over alerting the clinician and the pharmacist. And the real answer is to apply more data to the problem, more data that can be predictive. So with respect to longitudinal data and access, we're still at a point where we have almost no access to longitudinal information about the patients in a computable way. For example, when you go access Care Everywhere or another HIE, you just get a PDF file, which needs to be further processed and refined, and there's really no easy mechanism today. So I just was wondering what you guys are doing about that, because I know it comes up a lot to get more data available to the users.
You never want to talk about data fusion, do you? Go for it.
So I want to add an element of New York State, which is a consent state. So then it becomes even more difficult to get data across. But few distinctions. You brought up Care Everywhere and other. That's a pull model. And the pull model is really what essentially you look at the data and you get what you need for a patient perspective. It's definitely not coded, not normalized, all of that. What we can do from a health exchange perspective is create that framework. And we did create that framework. We created a patient portal. Again, it's for a patient level. Then we create a clinician portal. Same thing where we have added AI. So I have not used AI to really, maybe a good idea to normalize the data to find, increase the trust in there. But right now the goal is to really help clinicians synthesize that data. Think about it. We reconcile over 300 million MRNs every day across all the health systems. So it's over 9,000 entities, 27,000 physicians, 81 health systems. It's a large pool of data, which we consistently still do it in an old-fashioned way, consume it in an old-fashioned way. You will be surprised as to how many different ages for the patient exist in my system, from 27 to 127, right? That kind of a variation. So it is a lot of an old-fashioned way of receiving data, synthesizing it, normalizing it, parsing it, and then where you can really make a difference for a patient care is enable access to a clinician at a point of care. Again, there's the challenge right now, and I'll admit it. Todd was here yesterday, talked about our clinician portal with an AI tool. Absolutely, you can have an English-like interaction, get the answers you need, but it needs to be part of their workflow. We are still challenged at the part, and we should rightfully be. No clinician should be expected to go from A to B to look at data, right? So that's one challenge there. The other is from a patient perspective. Patient perspective, the challenge is you deliver them a data and they download it and very easily upload it to wherever they want it for interpretation. I've done it too, right? Just to get a sense of it, how well it can read a report. And there are tools which are reading report. Now, once patient uploads it, it's their problem, but that still exposes the data for that. So I'm a long way of answering your question. We haven't gotten to a point where that is freely available to every participating health systems longitudinally in their workflow. It is absolutely available to every participating health system. Now, what happens if you go to Maryland or New Jersey? You're not part of my health exchange. That data is not available, but that is somehow restricted by state consent. Now, if TEFCA takes on in next 3, 4, 5 years, where we have a critical mass all across and it's freely available, I'm sure that's the goal behind it. That may help solve that problem. But right now we are limited in some ways by the governing laws and in many ways also by the technology we have.
Yeah, but as you guys jump in, we get the general sense that, of course, interoperability is super important and longitudinal data is very important, but there's a whole bunch of stuff we can do without all of that as well, just with the data that we have in, especially big box health systems. Yeah, lack of data is not our problem, right? A lack of attention to what to do with that data becomes a problem. So where do we go to get that help? Use AI to give more attention to the data that we already have to go do something more valuable with it.
Feel very badly for HealthX that we're an opt-in. Here in New York, we're an opt-in state, not an opt-out. Means you have to give consent before you go in to get HealthX data, which is why clinically, most shifts, I don't use HealthX. I use Care Everywhere every single shift. That is the Epic interoperability network. So I'm in New York City Health and Hospitals. I can see data from NYU and New York Presbyterian, all the rest of them. Great. It actually works really, really well. I see the notes from the other institutions, I see labs. I do think I have a longitudinal framework on my patients. And then we actually go a step further, and with our main trading partners, meaning other healthcare systems in the country, in the city and in the region, we map their data in. So like a hemoglobin A1C from NYU will come into our system, and then we can fire clinical decision support against that and figure out if we need to go after that patient to get their hemoglobin A1C down from like a gaps in care perspective. So we do have that today. What's sad is that those national networks, the care qualities of the world that were supposed to be vendor agnostic, I just haven't seen them work very well yet. We're part of them. We're trying. It's just we're not all the way there.
Mhm.
But I do think AI and LLMs can really help us tap into the large data sets that we have, right? I think, especially with data that's hidden in PDFs or unstructured data, I think there's an opportunity for us to focus on how can we leverage AI to glean insights very quickly without a clinician having to go through the entire longitudinal record of a patient, especially if it's fragmented across multiple systems or multiple type of data, multimodal data. Are we there yet? Not yet. But I think that there's a lot of opportunity there, especially as this field is evolving, LLMs and multi-hop sessional models. Like there's a ton of new modeling that's coming out that could really make an impact here.
This reminds me of the very first EHR that I wrote was in 2001. It was the first web-based one. I was super proud, 25-year-old, building a very interactive web-based system. Very proud that I put together, the input forms and a bunch of radio buttons and click boxes and everything, and then take it to our physician reviewers, and they just look at me and it's like, "Are you insane? Why the hell are we going to go press all of these buttons when all I have to do is make a few notes in a piece of paper and get you to fax it in or scan it in?" And that's kind of like where we're sitting today. Is we keep saying, if only we had more data, if only we had, but whether it's ambient or anything else, that is not our problem. So even at Healthic today, you've got the ability to put in you have access to your own data. So you certainly are not consented to give it out to somebody else. But what amount of packaging are you guys allowed to do? And I'm not talking about general de-identification, but packaging to package up the insights from the data and then share those insights with your care partners.
Yeah. So for two purposes, right? For population health, for surveillance, we have several use cases where they have access to the data and they are able to. And again, if it's identified data, then it's absolutely all the consented data over a period of time, where all of this Department of Health and Mental Hygiene has been using it, H&H has been utilizing our data. So there are use cases for it. But I think the where value comes is a longitudinal de-identified data brings a lot of value.
Mm-hmm.
And from one thing we have learned, I think, is that claims data seems to be very important and interesting, because that's where the difference is between intent and actual, right? Yeah. And again, a patient may have gone to multiple other health systems and gotten those, either the appointments taken care, results done. Often it is not happening, at least in a busy market like New York with a large network, but we still see that. And so that tying up of the two datas together offer values. But I think there was a point brought up about multimodal data. Yes, a year ago, I also was of the opinion that, yes, why do we even need to normalize and convert? Because we all have seen Snowflake Cortex and Genie Spaces and all those things, how image data could be part of query and PDFs and all that thing. But in the end, what we end up developing is we're developing multiple use cases or multiple solutions, one for each use case. What brings me back to this is that we have to do the hard work. We have a project underway today now. We are extracting data from all of our unstructured data. At one time, that hard work has to be done to create the terminology database out of it. And then we can build models on it, which could be more than one use. So if I would say one statement here, that is, we don't have data problem, absolutely. What problem we have is it's fragmented. It's not available at the right time in the care episode. And what we really need to focus on is if we can have a same data infrastructure supporting clinical use cases, business use cases, operational use cases. And instead of, because I've been part of that world where we've been just satisfying each need separately. I think that is where we need to get to, all of us.
Fair enough. Yeah, go ahead.
There might be a win-win there for biotech in terms of longitudinal data, because, for example, in oncology, biotech companies, we don't have the capability to follow patients longitudinally. So if you're thinking about acute myelogenous leukemia, if they come in the door and you're taking care of that patient through that patient journey for, their survival of however many years, biotech company may help you with some of that data aggregation in terms of research, because once that leukemia patient relapses in terms of a mutation, they might be relapsing because there's a new genomic clone emerging. So in terms of biotech drug development, we would love to know, when do they relapse? Why do they relapse? And why is that new mutation emerging? And are there any genomic sequences or patterns in certain patient populations, for example, in acute myelogenous leukemia, that we can improve upon in terms of relapsing? Can you catch them earlier? Can you prevent relapse? Do you need to look at minimal residual disease? So there's all kinds of potential win-win opportunities to partner with biotech to do this from a longitudinal research perspective.
Is that something you guys are doing now?
We do now.
And how about you guys? Any coordination connection with biopharma? Does that scare the crap out of you guys, or does it just something you haven't thought about?
We have evaluated it. We recently evaluated the potential for doing that with our data. I mean, it's complicated. It's like one of the things that we could do. It's on our list, but we're not there yet.
Yeah,
the trial by trial, drug by drug scenario, but it's not like a deep partnership with any single biopharma company.
So the other day, I complained to a few senior executives at two different drug brands, which shall remain nameless. One of them is my mom is actually taking that drug for maintenance of her cancer. So what we walked through is, there's a lot of work that digital health that biopharma tries to do in digital health, but without access to what's happening in the EHR, without what's happening in the HIE world, et cetera, they stay blind to these things, right? Now, so we started talking, the whole conversation was a couple-hour conversation about, well, what if pharma companies had direct access to EHRs? I mean, you should just see some of the faces of people in the room saying, what do you mean direct access to EHR, right? So I said, look, let's just make this it's a friendly conversation. Let's pretend like there's no money involved. Let's pretend like we all care about the patient, and let's have that conversation. What would the physical connectivity there look like? And it is non-trivial. Even if everybody cared about the same thing, even if there were no issues about conflict of interest and ickiness of a pharma company being inside my data, these are the kind of things where I think true innovation now with AI comes in, is that it's obviously we like to say it's the patient's data, but that's bullshit. No, it's not actually the patient's data, right? What we say versus what we do are two completely different things. And so in this case, we want it to be all the patient's data, but if it was, we would honor what the patient wants, which is some level of minimal sharing. But the reason why I'm saying that's not true is we act as if this is, and truly, as it's institutional data. So it's not like the biopharma guys are taking research data and saying, let me share it with the docs, right? But the inverse is true. They're like, you should be sharing with me the EHR data. And we're like, well, would you share your R&D data? Well, no, of course not. Why would they need it? It was like, well, then why are you asking for things that you can't, which you can't share as well? So I'm curious from you guys is that, now that we're at a point where we have an abundance of data, the data fusion part of this equation is there. You've got the snowflakes, you've got, if you just want free databases, Postgres and others, they'll handle it. So if all of that is there, what are the business model and data sharing, commercialization, monetization conversations that we should be having, which if we are having them, we're kind of like hush hush right behind this sofa having them, rather than, we're all adults here, right? Everybody's in business to be business. We're in a capitalist society. Nobody's doing healthcare for free. So let's get over all of that baloney and say this data is valuable, and it's valuable at different times for different people. So what would an adult conversation look like in terms of being able to commercialize and make more valuable the data that you guys already have in health systems, whether it's for pharma or others? And what would you want from other industries in order to make your jobs easier?
Yeah. So
Easy questions.
Yes,
for the
super
afternoon.
easy. This is something that we have evaluated in the last year or so. I will say with H&H, we're the largest public health organization. Our population data is the underserved population, right? We serve the underserved population of New York City, and there's some sensitivity around the idea of commercializing our data because we're talking about selling data that, again, it seems ethically maybe
We'll just call it
questionable.
icky. We'll just call
Icky,
it
that's
icky.
right. It
It's icky.
gives the icks. So, just from that perspective, we really would have to think through what is in it for New Yorkers, right? What does our population gain from us potentially commercializing, which is, I think, a key term in itself. What do we gain? What do the New Yorkers gain from that? And then how do we move forward in that structure? So it's something that we've looked into. What is the value of data? Because any healthcare data is super valuable, whether we want to believe it or not. And we have to really be able to speak to it from a real ROI as well as the softer ROI, and decide if that's worth it for us. I will say on a smaller scale, we've partnered with startups to say, hey, we'll partner with you to build a model for us or localize or tune a model for us that's specific to our population. It's a risk-based model. So, we are giving you data to go ahead and fine-tune your model that you might not have had access to before. And then we get the model that we get to plug in clinical, administrative, whatever it is. And so
Let them keep their IP?
So far, yes. But that's not, it's up for debate, right? There are other ways. That's one approach. So we've had that type of partnership, which is smaller scale, right? We're not talking about our entire population. So yeah, I think it's an interesting field. And there's obviously other models out there where Mayo, for example, have figured out a way to commercialize their data. But much different population than the population we serve.
What do you guys think?
All of us on this stage are public health organizations. So I think that's in many ways a non-starter from a pure monetization perspective.
Well, you could accept money and then give the money to the patients.
So
Solves your problem,
oh, well,
right?
so
Who's gonna come back to you and say, no, I'd rather not have that money.
Maybe it goes back to the point when the data was collected, what was in the consent. And I think that consent is a promise that is made to a patient. After the fact, now changing rules, all kinds of rules get changed,
Yep.
but I think we are still living by the solemn pledge that there was a consent given by patient on our assurance that it will only be used for their care and not any purposes. So it gets into a tricky situation, absolutely. But if tomorrow you've got to start something new with a clear idea that this data collected will be commercialized, I think it's not a problem. But if you look around, no industry started that way. Here's Facebook is free, Gmail is free. All you're giving is data, which we never realized that, right?
No, that's right.
Yeah.
And I think
But we operate in much more regulated environment now.
Sure,
right?
sure.
Yeah.
No, and that's exactly right. So what about from your perspective as a clinician?
This gets back to what we were saying earlier. There is no such thing as de-identified data. And if there is right at this second, there won't be 2 years from now. So yeah, patients didn't consent for this. If there's a huge if, we changed all of our consents. We said, yep, we're going to be allowed to commercialize your data. I don't think I would still trust the majority of companies that have come knocking on the door asking for our data. I think, and it's not what our core expertise is as a healthcare system, meaning managing that relationship, we would need some type of third-party entity, be the repository of the data that we could put our data in, get money out, distribute that in some way that it benefits our patients. But this is a world that doesn't exist. You're asking to, which I
So the reason why I bring it up is that budgets are an issue. Lots and lots of things are an issue. And if data remember it was a Time magazine or the Economist magazine a number of years ago said data is the new oil. This is when the word big data and everything started coming out. And one thing we still dance around it instead of just coming out and saying, data, medical data sales is between a $9 to $15 billion a year business today and growing to about 25 billion by the end of this decade. So that's not getting smaller, just getting bigger. So question is, you guys are spending all the money collecting it. It has use to other people. You could fix up some of your own budget problems, et cetera, but we just got to have the conversations, right? And so I love being the crazy guy in the room just talking about this stuff, because in 3 years, everybody's going to do this. And then I'll look back and say, at least I did my part. So thoughts?
If I may add,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, they're not spending all this money to collect data. They're taking care of patients. That's
That's a side
that's
thing,
a,
You're I mean, truthfully,
That's a
we're all in the
byproduct
data
of
collection
it.
business. Just so happens that we do a little care on the side, right? No, I'm kidding. No, that's exactly right. And the reason why I'm bringing it up is that now that you have AI, if we use these things properly, the AI can generate better data, improve the data sets that we're using. And it sounds kind of weird, but you can take a dirty data set and apply AI and it becomes cleaner. There's a way of cleaning that, right? And so if we did that and we did it for different purposes, could that become the asset that handles some of our budget issues, et cetera? It's just worth, if we as the data people do not have that conversation, who the hell else is, right? And so we have to say that we are brave enough to talk about that the ickiness factor can go away if we have a proper conversation. But I think it's worth having. So we are out of time because I editorialized too much. So with that, let's give a big round of applause to our panelists here.